Welcome back to another episode of Sports-Fixx. I am your host, Carson Becker. We are back talking about another week of college football here. Another entertaining week, exciting week. The SEC just got a little more interesting. Alabama lost this past weekend to Oklahoma. Big news coming out of Virginia Tech. Their new head coach hiring, which I'll get to here in a second. A huge comeback from Texas A&M. They were down 27 points at halftime, come back and win that game against South Carolina at home. So a whole lot of entertaining games this past weekend, and I'll get to all that. But first, I want to talk about this Virginia Tech hiring. They hired James Franklin over the weekend as their new head coach. I think it's a great signing. He was real good at Penn State. He basically lost 2 games every year to Michigan and Ohio State, and other than that, he pretty much ran the table against all the other teams in the Big Ten. I feel like he can kind of do the same thing there in the ACC. With the ACC kind of has those top 4 or so teams every year, and other than that, it's been a little bit of a lower end conference. So I feel like he can perform pretty well in the ACC. I think this is a great step for Virginia Tech to turning around the program because it's not quite where they want it to be at this point. So I think that's a great hiring. He does have a tough schedule next year as his first year as head coach. He has to go to Clemson, to Miami. He has to play JMU and Georgia Tech. JMU and Georgia Tech home games for them, but at Clemson and at Miami. 2 pretty tough games. Miami has been pretty good. Clemson's been a little bit struggling this year, but they could be better next year. Maybe kind of I would say Florida State situation, but Florida State won that first game and they really have been disappointing since then, so can't even say that. But I think it's a great hire from Virginia Tech. He's apparently been stealing recruits from Virginia Tech for years at Penn State, and now he's probably going to bring a bunch of guys over with him to Virginia Tech. There was like 17 guys that decommitted from Penn State when he got fired, and not many of them, if any of them, had committed to other schools yet, so they're maybe waiting for him. So all those guys could be going with him over to Penn State. He's going to get a bunch of other guys in the portal and everything else. Virginia Tech really should be looking a lot better next year, I think, after this hire. So great hire from Virginia Tech there. Also, another bit of news, kind of up in the don't know how real or how much the information is accurate at this point, but apparently Lane Kiffin's family was visiting Gainesville and Baton Rouge this past weekend, so there could be opening there in Ole Miss. I know a lot of people saying Lane Kiffin might leave Ole Miss, even though they're really good. They're 10-1 right now at the moment. They're looking at a playoff spot. If they can get past Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl, it's looking like they're going to be a playoff team, so I would be kind of surprised if he left. I feel like he's built a good thing there in Ole Miss, so I would be kind of surprised, but apparently he's been looking in other places, so don't know how accurate it is, but apparently that's what's been happening. We'll see kind of what happens with that. I know a lot of people are saying he is going to leave Ole Miss. I don't think it happens, but who knows? We'll see how that turns out after the season, I guess, if they're a playoff team, so we'll see how that turns out. Now I'll kind of get into the games this past weekend, starting off with one of the crazier games that we saw this past weekend, South Carolina versus Texas A&M. I mean, South Carolina, they've been having a down year. They really haven't performed nearly as well as people thought. People thought Lenore Stell was going to play a lot better, me included. Thought South Carolina was going to build on what they had last year, where they really had a great end to their season, and they were going to be really good. But, I mean, in this game, they're up 30-3. You're thinking, all right, maybe they are going to kind of tune it up like they did last year at the end of the season, where they won some pretty big games and almost got into that playoff spot. And they're up 30-3 on the number 3 team in the country on the road and looking to shock the whole college football world. And then just an absolute complete breakdown of offense. I mean, I don't even know how to explain what they did in the second half. The play calling was horrible. They basically just ran the ball and punted the ball the whole second half. That's basically all they did. They were up 30-3 at halftime, and Texas A&M was basically back in the game in the third quarter because they did absolutely nothing. It was 30-24, I believe, at the end of the third quarter. So Texas A&M's back in the game before the fourth quarter even begins, and Yet South Carolina still can't do anything in the fourth quarter. At this point, Texas A&M has all the momentum. Their stadium's back in it. The 12th man's rocking at that point, and I mean, I don't get it. It was a huge breakdown. If I'm in the locker room at halftime, I'm saying this game is not over, which Shane Beamer did come out and say in his interview that he said this game is not over, the score doesn't matter going into the second half and all this. But I mean, you got to really get it through. You can't let your players go back out there and be like, "Oh, we're up 30-3. We're going to do whatever we want." You can't just run the ball every play and then punt the ball and hope your defense is. I mean, Marcel Reed, you're not going to be able to hold that offense down for the whole game. So, a complete breakdown, just an insane game altogether. 27-point comeback for Texas A&M. They end up winning 31-30. And, I mean, they got really aggressive. Marcel Reed really showed up. And South Carolina looked super good in the first half, throwing the ball over the field. Nick Harbor had a long touchdown. Right at the end of the half, they had all the momentum going into halftime, and they came out just so sluggish. It was just run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. They had a 97% chance to win the game at halftime. And, I mean, just insane that they lost this game. Marcel Reed, like I said, he played a terrible first half. And it was like night and day with him. He played a terrible first half, had 2 picks in the first half, and in the second half, he was firing on all cylinders. So it's like the teams just switched, and I don't know what happened, but just an absolute, just crazy game. Teams were 0-286, were trailing by 27 points or more. And, I mean, just an insane game for Texas A&M. And South Carolina, just a terrible, terrible way to lose a game like that. So, Texas A&M stays undefeated. They are still number 3. We'll see what the playoff rankings come out with today. Maybe they drop a little. I don't know. I doubt it, but maybe they drop a little. Was really hoping South Carolina was going to just blow them out, and it was really going to show that Texas A&M wasn't nearly as good as people thought. But Marcel Reed, he apologizes on Twitter. Sorry for the first half, and I mean, doing TikTok dances after the game because he came back and won. I mean, just a crazy game. So that was one crazy game. And then another game that was a really, really good game. Alabama versus Oklahoma. Alabama suffers their second loss of the season. Just not a good game for Alabama. Turnovers absolutely killed Alabama. They had 3. Oklahoma had 0. Alabama basically doubled Oklahoma in yards in this one. And Ty Simpson didn't look good. He threw the pick early in the game, which went for 6. Then he had a fumble in Alabama territory, which set Oklahoma up for points as well. So, not a good game from him. I saw a stat he's now fumbled in 5 straight games, and it was talked about a lot apparently leading up to the game, what he needs to do, get the ball out faster and all this stuff, and it just did not show out in this game. Oklahoma's defense did play very, very well. Alabama's defense also played very well in this one. It was just Alabama's offense just couldn't get it done, and Alabama kept setting Oklahoma up in positive field position. And it's really hard for a defense to stop a team every time when they're in positive field position. So, Ryan Williams returning a punt went for a turnover. That was one of the turnovers. He fumbled the ball. Ty Simpson throwing a pick. Ty Simpson fumbling the ball. All those turnovers were in Alabama territory, so it set up Oklahoma in really good spots to score points, and they really took advantage of it. I saw another stat that Oklahoma, on all of Oklahoma's scoring drives, I'm pretty sure it was all Oklahoma scoring drives, the farthest they've started from the end zone was the 45-yard line. So they started on Alabama's 45-yard line, was the farthest they started from the end zone on every single one of their scoring drives. I believe that was the stat. So, very crazy there. Just not a good showing from Alabama's offense. Oklahoma's offense capitalized on all the turnovers, and Oklahoma ends up winning the game. So, we'll see kind of what happens with that in the playoff rankings tonight. It's very interesting where those two teams will go. How far does Alabama drop? How much does Oklahoma rise? So we'll see where those teams set up here tonight. And you basically got a setup for Alabama where they have to go into Jordan-Hare, and they announced it's a night game, and they got to go win the Iron Bowl with their season on the line. So we'll see what happens with that. Alabama's going to have to play a lot better if they want to win in Jordan-Hare. It's a very tough stadium to play, and it will not be easy with Auburn basically having nothing to lose because they just don't have a great record, and Alabama having everything to lose. You know Auburn's going to come in firing in that one. That is going to be an incredible game like it always is, but we'll see how that one turns out. Another game from the SEC, Georgia blows out Texas. Arch Manning goes back to looking like Arch Manning did early in the season. Kirby Smart, the onside kick. I mean, just a masterclass from Georgia. They're finally peaking at the right point. Again, they play a complete game, and Georgia looks like a team I would not want to play. If I was any team in the playoff, I do not want to play Georgia right now. They're playing at a high level. They're really looking good. Gunnar Stockton's really gotten that offense going. They put up 35 points against a great Texas defense. I mean, that is a team that is firing on all cylinders at the perfect time. So we'll see what happens with Georgia in the playoffs. Texas now going to drop out of the playoffs, and we'll see kind of where they sit. This will be a very interesting playoff committee ranking here because there's going to be some pretty big changes here to see where teams drop to, and it's really going to depend on where they drop to on how much they can get back in and what needs to happen for them to get back in or for them to not fall out. So we'll see how the rankings come out tonight. Notre Dame beats up on Pitt. Game day was in Pitt. Thought it was going to be a pretty good game. Pitt coach didn't care if it was a good game because they're still fine in the ACC. They just had to win out. So, I mean, with all that, we all knew how that game was probably going to go. Jeremiah Love still looks like one of the best running backs in the country, and it doesn't seem very close. He's an absolute beast. Georgia Tech almost fumbles away their ACC championship chances as they almost lose to Boston College, who's 1-10 in the season. They are horrible. I mean, you would have thought Boston College had Matt Ryan playing quarterback because they kept up with a great Georgia Tech offense, put up 30 points on them. I mean, they're 1-10 and they're keeping up with Georgia Tech, and this late in the season, Georgia Tech, they need to figure it out here because they are still in this ACC championship, and losing to Boston College would have taken them right out of it. So the ACC, just as interesting as it was before, still going to be crazy. I still don't even know who to pick. I would pick Georgia Tech, but after that game, who knows? They probably lose to whoever else they play, Pitt or whoever it is. I mean, I don't even know what to do with that. So we'll see what happens to the ACC. You also had Iowa beating USC. That was one of the games I was really looking forward to. I thought Iowa was going to go in and win that game with how the weather was supposed to be. It was supposed to be raining like all game. Torrential downpour. Really, who could run the ball better? Iowa did run the ball better than USC, but USC does get the win there. So we'll see how the rest of that goes. Big Ten also in a spot that if Michigan beats Ohio State at the end of the year, Ohio State loses every single tiebreaker against the next three teams, which is like USC, Michigan, and somebody else. So Ohio State would not be in the Big Ten championship if they lost to Michigan and those teams went out. So that has big implications there. Navy beats USF, giving JMU the highest chance to make the playoff at 52% for the G5 spot. So we'll see what happens there. Also, G5 getting very interesting. USF drops out. JMU jumps in. North Texas still in a pretty good spot there to make the G5 spot as well. So we'll see what happens there. I believe it will be JMU tonight in the rankings as the G5 team. But we'll see with that. Another very interesting end to the college football playoff. So we'll see what happens with the playoff poll. And I have to mention it, Michigan almost losing to Northwestern. Michigan is just barely scraping by these teams that they should be crushing. Bryce Underwood had 2 picks, no touchdowns in this game. And he only has 7 touchdowns on the season, and he has 5 interceptions. So, I mean, Michigan at the end of the year, they still have to play that Ohio State team, best defense, all this stuff. They do get to play in Ann Arbor, and they have had Ohio State's number the last couple years, but I don't know. Can they run the ball well enough against the Ohio State defense to go and beat that team? That would be a very interesting game just because it's rivalry weekend. So we'll see with that one as well. But Michigan just not looking great just almost losing to a Northwestern team that is just not really that good. They had to go down and kick a field goal to win it, and it was just not a good game for Bryce Underwood or even the run game. It wasn't really a good game at all. So that's all the games I'll talk about in this episode of Sports-Fixx. Of course, like I said, the new playoff rankings will come out tonight. We'll see where some of these teams land. Looking at Alabama, Oklahoma, where those two teams go. Does Texas A&M drop a spot or something like that off their shaky win? Is JMU the G5 team, which I think they should be based on how it's set up right now? The ACC, what's going on in the ACC? Who's going to win the ACC? And everything else with that, we'll see kind of how they turn out with that. Also, the Twitter, I'm still at Sports-Fixx on Twitter. If you want to go follow the Twitter, I would appreciate it. And if you like this video, leave a like, subscribe if you're not subscribed, and I will see you tomorrow for an updated playoff rankings based on what happens tonight, and I'll go through my rankings and who I think would win those matchups and everything like that tomorrow. That will be another episode of Sports-Fixx. So, thank you for watching. I am Carson Becker, and I will see you next time.